One of the things that many people complain about is the inability to get good bookkeeping staff. And one of the reasons is because you can't afford to pay them well. Suddenly, using productivity, you're in a situation where you can radically increase their income. You have a much greater degree of stability in your workforce. And in the event that you find really outstanding bookkeepers that you want to employ, of course, you can have the pick of the crop because your productivity allows you to pay them better.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a great one. Our guest is making his triumphant return to the show. He is the co-founder and CEO of Receipt Bank, which is the software that extracts key data from your bills, receipts, and invoices and publishes it directly into your accounting or bookkeeping software. Alexis Prenn, welcome back.
Michael, I'm thrilled to be here. It's a great treat to be back with you in the new year. And I hope that we can form the podcast today can form part of people's New Year's resolutions that will make them more successful, more profitable, and indeed, of course, more productive. So I'm thrilled to be back, and thank you for the invitation.
Yes, well, I'm excited about what you've just said, which is, let's get this year started. And I know we have talked a little bit before we started recording about productivity and production and profitability. So these are excellent things to be thinking about right now, or really any time. But what a great time of year to get started and change the outcome for 2018. Now, Alexis, before we jump too heavily into this, for those that may not have heard the previous episode, and we have a link in the show notes to go to that previous episode, but could you just give a quick little highlight as to how you became Alexis Prenn and the CEO of Receipt Bank?
Indeed. Michael, well, Receipt Bank was actually founded in September of 2010. And probably I spend usually the first couple of minutes when I meet people explaining that we're not a bank. And actually, we're not in the expenses management business. We probably were back in September of 2010 for about 3 weeks. We were in the sort of expenses business and the receipts business, hence the name. But actually, within 3 weeks or so of starting the business and going out to talk to accountants about what we were doing and why it would be useful and relevant for them, and for the bookkeeping services that they were providing, very rapidly people came back to us and said, no, we want you to do invoices and credit notes and all of the costs of the business. Our clients are delighted to raise their sales invoices, but they don't want to deal with the costs. And when, after 3 weeks or so of listening to this pretty consistent feedback, we decided that we would do exactly what they were suggesting. That was the moment that we went into the field of basically bookkeeping productivity. If you think about it, actually, the last really, really exciting thing, major things in terms of bookkeeping, were probably about, 30, 40 years ago with the advent of really two things: personal computer, Microsoft Excel, and of course, for small business accounting applications, QuickBooks, Sage, MYOB, all of these sort of local desktop champions or personal computing champions. Nothing much has happened in the last 30 or 40 years. And Receipt Bank, by accident, largely back in 2010, became a champion of bookkeeping productivity. Quite rightly, you point out that one of the pieces of low-hanging fruit for bookkeepers is for a technology business to be able to do the data extraction of their client documents. But obviously, we've expanded beyond that into a full suite of collection from their clients, so the mobile apps and so on. And the consequence of that is that we have also extended into genuine software automation, and increasingly in the next probably 6 to 12 weeks, we will be launching a whole suite of machine learning and artificial intelligence solutions that will further boost productivity. So that's where we are today. And hopefully that answers your question.
It certainly did. it's going to be exciting to see where you're moving with these new releases, and it's always exciting to hear that people are able to get more done in less time. Now, we started, another thing that we started talking about, Alexis, was this whole concept of productivity. And you had asked me the question, are you familiar with people talk about productivity as, oh, I'm getting stuff done in my day, like it's a personal productivity. But there's a whole conversation around productivity from the old world around factories and being able to, Henry Ford would come up in that conversation, right? So yes, things have changed, but let's talk a little bit about productivity. When you talk about productivity, what are you talking about?
Well, I'm just really, there is a slight expectation that the bookkeeping is a sort of artisan craft. And that the same disciplines of productivity cannot be applied to this craft-based business. And that just simply really isn't true. It may not be able to apply to everything, but there's a very material chunk of opportunity to take away some of the more routine and repetitive functions of bookkeeping. I mentioned, obviously, data extraction as being one, but certainly even things like storage, scanning, filing, collection, coding, all of these relatively mundane and simple tasks that repeat. I mean, a small business, for example, will be using the same suppliers. If you look at a quarter, probably 80, possibly 90% of the transactions, the costs of the small business are exactly the same, quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four. And so the opportunity to streamline that and simplify that is there. And when we started, we were working on the basis of typically a bookkeeper, and this is a rule of thumb, would look after maybe 10 clients. So roughly 20 working days in a month. And a typical bookkeeper, whether they're working for themselves, whether they're working in an accountancy practice or a larger, maybe a bookkeeping practice, a rule of thumb is that they might be looking after something in the region of 10 small business clients. It depends on the nature of the small businesses themselves, but that's a pretty good rule of thumb. And what we're seeing today is that by streamlining these repetitive tasks, what we are seeing is that bookkeepers are able to look after not 10 clients, but maybe 30, 40, or indeed maybe 50. And indeed the expectation is over the course of the next coming years that should be able to increase to, who knows, maybe 1 to 100. And what that suddenly does is it suddenly the opportunity for listeners of your show to multiply their productivity. So if they were just getting, let's say they were getting $500, just to keep the math simple, $500 a client, and they're looking after 10 of them, that's $5,000. Okay, thank you very much. But suddenly we're now in a situation where they're looking after 30 clients. And so instead of making $5,000, they can make $15,000. And so this is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to make a profit, to radically increase the if you like, the returns per hour. It's also, by the way, an opportunity to shape the client experience that you're actually providing to your clients, because things are happening really, really fast. Things aren't waiting until, the third Wednesday at 3:00 for that slot when that particular client's work gets done. You're now in a situation where things can be happening much, much more regularly. And the speed with which the client's books are being maintained is also accelerating. So the combination of putting money in the bookkeeper's pocket or in the firm's pocket and at the same time shaping our client experience seems to us to be very exciting and compelling.
It is very compelling. And, the concept or idea that you've said, going from a handful of clients to like 50 clients. I mean, I'm sure there are listeners, right, going, wow, couldn't even imagine that. But what if? And you're actually doing this, right? You're helping people do this. I mean,
that's exactly right.
The impact financially to the business is incredible, and what you're delivering back to clients is incredible as well, because they get more information more readily available, and they can make better business decisions with more real-time data. Now, you wrote a manifesto, the Receipt Bank's Productivity Manifesto. Talk a little bit. Why did you write the manifesto?
It just seemed to me that it was useful. I'm telling you, it's one of those things, I literally just sat down and wrote it. I haven't thought about doing it before, and I don't find that writing necessarily comes particularly intuitively to me. So this is one of those sort of extraordinary moments when just an urge to do it occurred. And it just seemed to me that I had, as a result of my experience, my previous commercial experience, some of which was spent actually making clothing. So I'm probably one of the few people who is running a technology business who's actually spent probably 8 years actually involved in clothing manufacture. And one of the things about clothing manufacture is you do learn about productivity. The whole profitability of the business is ultimately determined by how efficiently you can run your suppliers, your materials, your costings, and so on. So I knew a lot about it, and it just seemed to me there were so many people who were very expert at bookkeeping, very expert at accounting, but they really didn't know very much about product. I didn't think they knew very much about how to do productivity on a sort of, to a certain extent, industrial scale. Something beyond just completing the work that was in front of them, genuinely building their systems and their processes that would give them the kind of profitability that was available. I mean, it's not magic. It's just simply following the rule book, and hey presto, you will get the result that you desire. So I wrote this productivity manifesto, and of course, one of the interesting things about it is actually you don't actually start with bookkeeping. You actually start with basically a data set, which just simply says how many clients are you providing bookkeeping services to. It's slightly extraordinary how many firms don't actually know how many clients they're providing bookkeeping services to. So just setting up the framework to calculate what the productivity, I used the ratio of 1 to 10. Well, of course, you need to know how many bookkeepers you've got, full-time equivalents, and you also need to know how many clients you've got, it's a combination of the two. So anyway, that's pretty much where it started. It was extremely well received. I think in the book business, it's been reprinted a few times. It's been reprinted in French as well. But it basically provides a framework for people who are looking to boost their profitability as to the steps that they would need to take in order to do it. So anyway, that was where it started.
I love it. I think what I heard you say, I've read the manifesto and really liked it. It's short, it's sweet, it gets to the point. But what you've said has opened something up that I think is interesting, a frame or a context that we could listen or read through, which is, if you want a business that runs more efficiently, and to think more of this business that you're in, as the listener is in, like a Henry Ford would look at one of his factories. So Henry Ford was one of the leaders in creating capacity and figuring out efficiencies and how can we get more cars off of this production. But a lot of times people will say, they will cringe when we talk about an assembly line, right? It's that you lose quality or you lose something when you have a production line. But really, Henry Ford didn't lose quality. He actually improved quality. He improved a whole bunch of things, right? Mm-hmm. And this is what we're talking about, is to think of this from the eyes of your business. I think as the community of bookkeepers, because so many are solopreneurs, right, working for themselves, even if they have a couple of staff, they think of it like it's that they are the business. But if you can separate you from the business, say, I am a human being, that I work for a business. It's called so-and-so's business. That's my business, but you're not your business. So this conversation is about the business saying, what's good for the business? Sure.
It's also, I would say that I absolutely 100% agree with all of what you said. I would also just say one other thing, which is it is very hard to imagine the number of conversations that I have myself, or my staff have, my colleagues have with clients all around the world, is that they got into bookkeeping not because they like doing data entry, not because they like doing filing, not because they like ringing up their clients and nagging them about documents that are required for VAT or GST returns. That isn't why they got into bookkeeping. They got into bookkeeping because they actually like talking to clients. That's the client. It's the client conversation where they're talking about the client's businesses, which is what they enjoy. It's about the money that they can make with a very flexible, self-employed lifestyle that they like. There's nothing fundamentally joyful around filing Starbucks receipts. I mean, it's not or at least I would suggest to the vast majority of people, it is not their primary motivation. It's about the client, and it's about the rewards, the income that they can enjoy as a result. And so the Productivity Manifesto was really, really designed to simply say, well, let's put in place a framework that allows you to track what your productivity actually is today, and then for you to progressively improve it. And some people will use the extra productivity to spend more time with their families. They will make the same amount of money, but it will just take them a lot less time to do it. And some people will just simply get the bug and will want to, expand and will want more money and will take on more staff and more clients and get into a virtuous circle. How people choose to spend productivity is entirely down to them. But what we can be pretty confident, I think. I mean, nobody's ever said to me, "Oh, gosh, Alexis, if you took away the filing, I would be bereft. I couldn't possibly go down the productivity route because the filing is so rewarding and stimulating." It's just simply not the case. And so we have a golden opportunity with some relatively simple foundations to put in place genuine productivity and quite rightly, as you said, and to improve the quality of the product that we're actually providing to the clients at the same time. But you have to start somewhere. Measuring your existing productivity is a good place to start. If you're working, for example, as you mentioned, maybe in a small or indeed in a firm which is more than just one person. I did a conference here in London just before Christmas. And I'd spoken for about 45 minutes on the subject of productivity. There were around about 80 people in the room, and it just suddenly occurred to me as I was talking. I said, "As a matter of interest, how many of you in your practices have implemented any kind of performance-based pay, productivity-based pay for your bookkeeping staff?" And only two people had. Only two people had. And so here we are in a situation where it's quite easy to do checkbook productivity. It's quite easy. What I need to do is I need to go out and get Receipt Bank, and I need to do this, that, and the other. And Alexis has given me a productivity manifesto. But you know what? If your staff aren't going to benefit from the productivity that they are and intimately a part of, it's unlikely to be successful. So there are relatively simple things to do. And if you're tracking, for example, your bookkeeping ratio, and your bookkeeping ratio in your practice has gone from, say, 1 to 10 to 1 to 20, you should be twice as profitable. And to share some of that with the staff who've made that possible strikes me as being a very good deal. One of the things that many, many people complain about is the inability to get good bookkeeping staff. And one of the reasons is because you can't afford to pay them well. Suddenly, using productivity, you're in a situation where you can radically increase their income. You have a much, much greater degree of stability in your workforce. And in the event that you find really outstanding bookkeepers that you want to employ, of course, you can have the pick of the crop because your productivity allows you to pay them better. Is that helpful?
Very helpful. It's exciting, and it always comes back to, my thinking there as you were speaking was, really the people that embrace all of this new technology and really get it figured out from a number of perspectives. One being, how can this technology help my clients, right? Because that's number one. How can this technology have my clients go, wow? And then number two, how can I make this technology help my staff and have my staff benefit? I worked for a while, I worked for Salesforce.com.
Yep.
And one of the reasons, so Salesforce.com, for the listener, if you're not familiar with it, started off as a cloud-based CRM. And the way they built that CRM, now it's changed dramatically. It does just about everything, bakes bread, I think. But the way they started this was they made that tool enable the salesperson to be more successful. It wasn't about they didn't build it from the perspective, let's help sales managers, manage their staff better. They started with, if we can make salespeople make more money using this tool, we know we're going to be more successful, because the adoption rate was incredible. Once you got people using it and they understood it, and it's like, this makes it easier for me as a salesperson to use this tool. And that all rolled up to leadership and management, is that the salesperson loved it. It helped them be more successful, make more sales. Therefore, the data inside there helped managers manage better and give more analytics and information around what was going on in the sales organization. So it was a win-win for everyone. Similar thing happening here. Technology, think of how it's going to help your customers. How is this going to help my staff? And then how is this going to help you, the business owner? You're providing, and Receipt Bank is one of those solutions that's providing the ability to do this today and continually will improve and do all sorts of new things. So it's the people that embrace that and think from those perspectives that I think are going to win in the future.
Well, you'd have to be fairly pessimistic to think that things are going to stay the same. I mean, change happens. And the one thing actually we can be absolutely confident of is that things are going to change. The exciting thing for bookkeepers and their colleagues and staff and so on, the exciting thing is that the tools that radically change what it is to be a bookkeeper, where you can do it from, and indeed the nature of that role, you get more of the good bit than the bad bits. And that in itself has got to be a good thing. As I said earlier, how people choose to use that, if it's only working 3 days a week instead of 5, if it's actually scaling a business without taking on more staff. Interestingly enough, I think I may have mentioned this in our very first conversation, was our very first accounting client. In her case, she just moved to a smaller office. I promised her all kinds of productivity gains. This is back in the beginning of 2011. And because she wasn't storing any of the documents on her premises, she simply cancelled the lease and moved to a smaller office and pocketed the rent. So people achieve, different the financial outcomes using different approaches. But undoubtedly, at the beginning of 2018, if you want to make more money out of your practice, the tools are available to do it. The Productivity Manifesto helps you with, pretty step-by-step. This is what you need to do. Count how many clients you're doing. Count how many bookkeepers you've got. This is your ratio. Okay, well, this is how we expand it from there. So, the opportunity to secure either the money or the time, or possibly a bit of both, there's never been a better time to do it. And probably, without wanting to be in any way a sort of scaremonger, the reality is other people are doing it. And of course, productivity does give them the opportunity. I'm not going to say they're going to take it, but they can achieve the same client outcomes that cost a lot less money. And so potentially, from a productivity perspective, there is a powerful incentive to be ahead because you get to keep the clients. Whereas if other people are implementing productivity, they can produce a much better client experience for less money. And then, of course, you're in you have a problem with client churn, and of course, it's very difficult to sustain a business with high levels of churn. So, okay, useful.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a big one right there, is that what do you do? You got this extra productivity. What do you do with that time that you've gotten a resource, right? It's money, it's time. There's resources that you're now gaining. What do you do with that? Well, go talk to more customers, build more relationships with people. If you're not getting this gain, your competitor is. And so, if we bring this back to very simple farming, everybody understand, well, maybe not today, but farming is such a good analogy, or it was a good analogy, right? You got two farmers' fields. One who embraced technology, right? They're going to be able to get the field sowed. They're going to be able to have more time to expand the field so they can produce more. They can make bigger crops. That money that comes back, they can invest in more equipment, more resources. They become the more successful farmer because of investing in technology. The right investments, of course. There's all sorts of things you could go and do. Are you doing the ones that are proven, the ones that give you the predictable outcome, of course? But yep. this is the way to think. This is your livelihood. This is your business. How are you going to make your business grow and flourish? Well, it's embracing things that work and giving yourself the opportunity to have the edge up on your competition. So I just absolutely love it. And it's a great conversation for this time of year. We don't like to date the podcast, but I have been dating them just because I think it's natural around the beginning of the year. This is early in the year. And so we've got the Receipt Bank's Productivity Manifesto. We have a link to it. It's very short, but it has some step-by-step actions that you can take and follow. And I recommend that you go ahead and do that.
Well, I hope your listeners will. So often people struggle. They say, oh, yes, I'm interested in that, but they don't know how to take the first step. And the Productivity Manifesto is really designed to be the first steps that you can take. I'm literally just looking at it now, and in fact, the last paragraph is also kind of useful. So, for your listeners who are thinking, well, I'd like to have more time with my family, I'd like to have more money, or I'd like to do a bit of both. This is a very practical guide, very simple step, genuinely simple steps as to what you do. But the conclusion, the last paragraph actually says, productivity never ends. There are always areas for improvement and analysis. And once you've got your ratio from 1 to 10 to 1 to 20, you can get it to 1 to 50 or indeed 1 to 100. And of course, that in many ways is the fascinating challenge and the sort of cerebral game about managing your business and not actually being part of the business, but actually managing the outcome of the business. And I think this will be, I hope, a useful tool for many of your listeners to make that transition. And I hope they take it.
I do as well. And so as a takeaway, as something to do, schedule yourself an hour or even 30 minutes. You're listening right now. Maybe you're driving, so don't do that now. But take time to schedule time to review something like the Receipt Bank's Productivity Manifesto and look at what's happening. Because I would assert that what gets in our way is that we're constantly doing the work, doing the way that we've always done it. And we don't take time, carve time out of that schedule to actually look at new things and figure things out and make exciting new steps forward. So this is an opportunity at this time of the year to say, okay, I'm going to investigate this. I'm going to look at how can I understand what is my current rate of productivity, because this manifesto will help you figure that out. And then what's a goal that I can set it at? And what's some technology? What are some things that are happening in the industry that are going to help me be more effective, more profitable? So it's an exciting time to do that. And Alexis, thank you so much for coming back and sharing this manifesto with you and your experiences and what you're doing over at Receipt Bank.
Michael, it's really a treat. Thank you very much indeed for having me back. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to your listeners. And I will now use the time over the course of the next 6 months to come up with another manifesto on another subject. And if you and your listeners have any thoughts about what that subject might be, I'd be very happy to hear from them. So thank you to you for your time. Thank you to your listeners for their interest. And if there's anything that I or indeed any of my team can do to help them on that journey, we're only too happy to help.
Excellent. And we'll have some links on where you can go and shoot that information or suggestions to Alexis, whether it's via Twitter or your LinkedIn, something along those lines. But let Alexis know what you're challenged with, where you're heading, what you'd like more of. He will definitely love to hear that.
Happy to do so.
Excellent. That wraps another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.